maybe around the third day on the ventilator, the head of the PICU come in the room and he said, we're the biggest PICU in the country, pediatric intensive care unit. Almost every child we put on a ventilator gets off. Unfortunately, we don't think Emily's going to get off, so you might want to call your family in. I said, well, I know that she's going to change the world, so please keep trying to help her because I'll see you at rounds tomorrow. And he pulled me into the hallway and looked at me like I was the most naive parent in the world. And he said, there's a 1 in 1,000 chance your daughter's alive when the sun comes up. You better call your family in. The next day, he came with his group of young doctors and said it's medically hard to explain how Emily's still here, but that's why we never give up on a child. And within an hour of that, Dr. Grupp showed up and said the team and the lab stayed up all night identifying what's wrong in Emily's system. And we found this protein that's 1,000 times higher in her system than anybody we've ever seen. It's off the charts. And we happen to have an arthritis drug. We have 2 doses of this arthritis drug that's never been used on a cancer patient that takes that protein down, and we feel like it could give her a chance. And that saved her life. So that medicine was called tocilizumab, and they gave Emily that medicine, and within hours we were hearing the nurses say we've never seen a child this sick get better any faster. And they were, and I posted online, I believe I'm witnessing a miracle. And she came back to us then and woke up on her 7th birthday from that 14-day coma.
This is Genetics for Healthcare, a podcast for patients.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Genetics for Healthcare, a podcast dedicated to helping patients and their caregivers advocate for a precision medicine approach to treatment, disease screening, and prevention. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you choose to listen and get your podcast, but also connect with us on our social media platforms on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. While you're there, hit that subscribe button, especially on YouTube, to get alerts and updates on new and informative episodes like this one. Today, I am honored and privileged to have Tom Whitehead, co-founder of the Emily Whitehead Foundation, along with his wife, Kari, and daughter, Emily. Emily was the first pediatric cancer patient treated and cured with CAR T therapy, gene editing, for acute lymphoblastic leukemia, or ALL, which is a cancer of the bone and bone marrow. Is the most common cancer type in children, accounting for 25% of all childhood cancers in the U.S. And I found the Emily Whitehead Foundation through our great podcast guest, Victoria Gray, who was the first sickle cell patient ever treated and cured of her symptoms of sickle cell. Tom, thank you so much for being a guest on Genetics for Healthcare.
Oh, you're welcome. It's an honor to be here.
Can you share with us the events that led to Emily's initial diagnosis?
Yeah, so Emily was born May 2nd, 2005, perfectly healthy. I can remember she weighed 10 pounds, and she remained completely healthy till just after her 5th birthday. And she had graduated preschool, getting ready for kindergarten, and we were going into Memorial Day weekend. And that week, my wife, Kari, noticed a lot of bruising on Emily's body. And the night before she was diagnosed, Kari called me and said, I was putting Emily in the bathtub tonight, and she has 21 bruises all over her body, and some of them have been there for more than a week, and they aren't getting better. And when she was brushing her teeth this week, twice I noticed blood on her gums. And when I went to work today, I Googled those symptoms, and it said acute lymphoblastic leukemia is a possibility. So when Kari called me, I reminded her that we had just had Emily at her pediatrician 2 weeks before, where she had a full physical, and they told us she was perfectly healthy. So, but overnight that night, everything changed for us. Emily got up twice and said there's a lot of pain in my knees. And by morning, she was crying and saying, there's something wrong with my legs. And we literally, went from healthy to being on a morphine pump with cancer. And then we knew then that our lives were going to change and never be the same after that. But, I thought to myself, she has to see that we're strong. So I went to the ER and I picked her up And I told her that only the strongest children are picked to fight cancer, and that she was going to be a hero and beat it no matter what. So we stuck together. We live in Phillipsburg, Pennsylvania, but we ended up in the Hershey Children's Hospital that day, going into the holiday weekend. So the least senior staff was on, and they said, we really won't have a definite diagnosis till the following Tuesday. So Friday, now she's on a morphine pump for the weekend. We got through that weekend, and that Tuesday, they come back and said it is acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It is the most curable kind of pediatric cancer. It is the most common kind, the garden variety, they called it. And if you do 26 months of chemotherapy, she's going to be fine, because they told us there was an 85 to 90% survival rate and chance, survival, and 90% of the kids get better. So, we looked around and saw other families that were in much worse situation than we are. And I talk about how quickly my perspective changed because, the first day that we went in to that hallway, Emily's our only child, and I was devastated to be in that hallway. And within 2 weeks after her diagnosis, they gave her a couple of rounds of outpatient chemotherapy, and then she developed infections in both legs when it knocked her immune system down. And like I said, May 28th of 2010, she was diagnosed. And then on June 11th, we took her back down with severe leg pain again, and they said she had necrotic fasciitis, which is, tissue dying in her left thigh and her right calf. And she went into a surgery where they said they might amputate both of her legs just a couple weeks after the initial diagnosis. And we ended up in the intensive care unit with wound vacs in both of her legs that were very painful. And she got through that. They saved her legs. They told us they hadn't seen infections like that for 30 years. Some of the doctors said they had never seen it. But she got through that intensive care unit and got in remission. And a couple weeks after the first time I walked down that hallway devastated, we were celebrating getting back to the cancer floor where she still had her legs. So things didn't go well in the beginning, but the chemotherapy worked, and she did get into remission, and she stayed that way for 16 months.
Wow. Thank God for fathers. Obviously, mothers are God's gift to the world, but fathers are where our kids many times find their inner strength, that core strength to endure, um, you know, incidents like these or tragedies in life. Um, Tell us, what was Emily's disposition through it all?
Yeah, so I mean, in the beginning, it was pretty rough because, we got started, and I said, we're going to stay positive. You have to smile once every day. We're going to stick together. We're going to take the positives of this because now we'll be together every day instead of me being at work. And but it was really tough whenever the surgeries happened on her legs. She was in so much pain, and they had to give her a lot of steroids to help kill the cancer. So, she retained a bunch of fluid. She was in pain in both legs with the wound vacs, and she was angry then. But, we called in a psychologist and said, look at what she's been through here in the last few weeks. And she's just in a really tough spot. And he said, hey, when she's yelling and hollering and she's angry, she's not going to get pneumonia. So that keeps her lungs clear. And he said, she's not going to offend anybody here, and she's fighting for her life. So he said, we don't worry about the kids in her situation unless they go completely silent, because then there might be some mental damage going on that's hard to fix. So again, really rough start, but we looked at the positives each time, and we would go down to the playroom together, even when it was in a wheelchair, and play air hockey and do something every day that at least brought a smile. But she was really amazing through it all, and she's very intelligent. She always loved to read, even though she was 5 years old at diagnosis. Her and my wife loved to read, so that we would stay in the room all day, and they would read books or watch TV together and just try to make the best of it. But I did tell her that we're going to just use this time to become closer as a family and stick together and be with you no matter what.
And so she was in remission for 16 months. So what happened next?
Yeah, so we got to around October of 2011. She had healed up from her leg surgeries. But throughout that 16 months, even though the chemotherapy was working, we would have little signs that it was different than what the other kids went through. They would tell us, we've given Emily a lot of chemotherapy, and usually the kids lose their hair by now, and she didn't. She eventually lost it, but it was much later than most. And just we kept hearing this almost never happens at different times. But in October of 2011, Emily was home. My wife's Aunt Kathy was babysitting her for the day. And she just looked up while she was playing and said, I think the blast cells, which is what they called her cancer, are growing again in my legs. And we had routine blood work scheduled at the Mount Nittany Medical Center. And we had Dr. Jim Powell, local, who was their pediatric oncologist. So we went to see him the next day, and I said, can you really check her over well? Because she announced yesterday that she thinks the cancer cells are growing again. And he's like, Tom, when chemotherapy works for these kids, it works. So he gave her a good, thorough check, and he said, go home, and I'll let you know when we get the blood work. And that was the first time in her treatment that he didn't call me back the same day with the blood results. So by the next day at supper time, when he called, and I could tell in his voice as soon as I answered the phone, he said, this is, again, almost never happens, but we see cancer cells in Emily's blood, and you're going to need to get a bone marrow check tomorrow. And this is, going to be a full relapse. And now you're going to go, the protocol would be go to bone marrow transplant. And now the survival rate is less than 30%. And since she didn't have any siblings, you're going to have to find a non-related donor to donate the bone marrow for the transplant, and everything, has changed now. So again, that was even harder to hear than the initial diagnosis. And it was harder for Emily as well, because we kept telling her, trust what the doctors tell you. We just got to do this for 26 months and you'll be fine. And now here we go again. So, but one of the best decisions we made was to get a second opinion at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia before we started to do anything, because we had seen some other families that were there at Hershey, and if Hershey didn't have the means to fix them, they would transfer them down to CHOP. So we had sent her records down, and then we went down for a second opinion, and that's when we met the team down there. And like I said, it was one of the best moves we made. And on the first visit down, they said, we're going to do the same thing that Hershey's going to do. And the Hershey Children's Hospital was 2 hours from our home, and the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia was 4-hour drive. And Emily knew all the nurses at Hershey. So she was like, I think I'd like to stay at Hershey to do this. So we attempted to do that. And they identified a non-related donor with a 10 out of 10 protein match that we ended up never meeting. And their goal was to go to bone marrow transplant the first week of February of 2012. But while they were prepping her for that, in January of 2012, they come in our room one day and said, we called your donor, told him we need him or her to donate the first week of February, and they said they're not available till the last week of February, so we have to put her on hold because we don't have a choice. And then mid-February, she relapsed again, and they told us she no longer qualifies for bone marrow transplant, so we'll give her one more round of chemotherapy, and it's time to take her home and enjoy the days you have left with her. So I wasn't going to do that. So I paged the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and I said, we're going to leave Hershey, and we're coming down to your hospital and giving you her full care no matter what, because we know that you are a big research center and that you have more options. And I'll never forget the doctor said, it's amazing that you paged me today. The last email I read yesterday was giving us permission to try CAR T-cell therapy, and it's never been used on a child anywhere in the world. And we think Emily could benefit from it. So we transferred down to CHOP on March 1st of 12, and we met Dr. Stephen Grupp and his team, who explained to us what CAR T cell therapy was.
Was genetic testing offered at any time?
Yeah, that was part of it. And they had, they just said our research here is some of the best in the world, and we'd like to extract Emily's T cells and do every kind of genetic testing and modification, because they said if her T cells will grow for this trial, we need to do a growth test first, and then if they will grow, then we can take them off to the lab. And what they described to Emily is we're going to genetically modify your own T cells and turn them into an army that will come back in and fight against your cancer cells and hopefully eradicate them.
I'm amazed by the bedside manner and just the giftedness to be so empathetic and explain such complex things in such a simplistic way, even to children as they did for you. But how did the trial go, and what was the healing process like?
Okay, so after he described to us what they would do, then it was time for a consent. And we signed that fairly quickly because the other option was go home and enjoy the days you have left with her. But the next thing they did, they sent her to surgery and they put a catheter in her neck to extract her T cells, and that allows the blood to flow out into the machine and then back in through the catheter after they put her blood into a centrifuge and spun out the white T cells. So they did that around March 6th after we went down there March 1st, and then they gave her the harshest round of chemotherapy that she had received because they had to slow the cancer down so she could survive the 6 weeks that it would take to genetically modify her T cells. And they gave her clofarabine was the name of the medicine, and that completely wiped out her immune system. And then she had to stay in isolation in her hospital room for 6 weeks there at CHOP while they took her cells to the lab and genetically modified them. And then it was a great day for us. Whenever Dr. Grupp came in and said April 17th is going to be day one, and we have no idea what's truly going to happen because it's never been tried on a child. So we're going to give her 10% of her own cells back on April 17th, and we'll give her 30% of the cells that we feel she needs on the 18th. And then if everything goes well, she'll get the rest of the dose on the 19th. So it was huge for us because during that 6 weeks, they told us if she even gets a common cold, she can't fight it. It could take her life. So you can't bring germs in the room. And it was very stressful waiting for that to happen. So, but then they did give her 10% of her cells on April 17th, and we allowed, a film crew to come in the room with us because I didn't know any other way to look at it other than, she's going to change the world. So, we want footage of this. So the PR team asked, can we have a film crew follow you that day? And I said yes, and that wasn't easy to do either. But like I said, I'm a positive person. I didn't know any other way to look at it. But day one, she got 10% of the cells, and nothing happened, which is good. Boring days in the oncology unit are good days. And day two, she got the 30% of the cells, and we actually left the hospital and went to my sister-in-law's in Wilmington, Delaware, until around midnight when she spiked a fever. And at that point, we weren't comfortable being outside the hospital. So we went to the ER and waited till morning. And in the morning, she didn't have a fever, felt fine. And Dr. Grupp came in and said, it's your call, but we feel that this would give her the best chance if she gets the rest of her cells. And we agreed to that. And then we kind of went through the worst part of her treatment. We found out later that every genetically modified CAR T cell can kill 1,000 tumor cells. And when they put those cells back in her body, she weighed around 68 pounds, and 3.5 pounds of her body weight was cancer. So there was so much cancer dying so fast that it overwhelmed her system, and she had what they call cytokine release syndrome, or a cytokine storm, when your immune system just goes crazy. So within 24 hours of getting her last dose, she was hallucinating, she was having severe pain, she was having breathing difficulty, blood pressure difficulty, and they ended up taking her to the intensive care unit and putting her into an induced coma on a ventilator breathing for her, and she remained that way for 14 days. So very brutal. But we started a blog on day one, and we kept that blog the whole way through. And at that point, it was just asking people to pray for her if you pray, or send positive thoughts, and that really helped us through that time. But maybe around the third day on the ventilator, the head of the PICU come in the room, and he said, we're the biggest PICU in the country, pediatric intensive care unit. Almost every child we put on a ventilator gets off. Unfortunately, we don't think Emily's going to get off, so you might want to call your family in. And I said, well, I know that she's going to change the world, so please keep trying to help her, because I'll see you at rounds tomorrow. And he pulled me into the hallway and looked at me like I was the most naive parent in the world. And he said, there's a 1 in 1,000 chance your daughter's alive when the sun comes up. You better call your family in. And I said, okay, I'll see you at rounds tomorrow. And the next day, he came with his group of young doctors and said it's medically hard to explain how Emily's still here, but that's why we never give up on a child. And within an hour of that, Dr. Grupp showed up and said the team and the lab stayed up all night identifying what's wrong in Emily's system. And we found this protein that's 1,000 times higher in her system than anybody we've ever seen. It's off the charts. And we happen to have an arthritis drug. We have 2 doses of this arthritis drug that's never been used on a cancer patient that takes that protein down, and we feel like it could give her a chance. And that saved her life. So that medicine was called tocilizumab, and they gave Emily that medicine, and within hours we were hearing the nurses say we've never seen a child this sick get better any faster. And they were, and I posted online, I believe I'm witnessing a miracle. And she came back to us then and woke up on her 7th birthday from that 14-day coma. And that would be May 2nd of 12. And then 8 days later, which is 23 days from her first dose of CAR T cells, they checked her bone marrow and she was completely cancer-free.
If you're not growing in your faith and just inspired, my heart is on fire. If you're not, I don't know what's wrong with you, but um, Tom, I just feel my faith growing as I'm talking to you. Where does that faith come from? That conviction, that core belief inside of you, like,
Yeah.
where does that come from?
Well, we have a book about our story called Praying for Emily, the Faith, Science, and Miracles That Saved Our Daughter. And that's where I put my part of the faith in that part of our story, because I was, going back when Emily was at Hershey still, before we were even at CHOP. And 2 days in a row, I was praying before I went to bed, because they're saying, like, she's starting to die. Just praying, like, help us get her through this, and I'll spend the rest of my life paying it forward. And through the night, 2 nights in a row, I saw, people say you get a sign. Well, I got the sign, and I could see her in the bone marrow transplant hallway at CHOP, and I was helping her get out of bed, learning to walk again, and I knew she had beat cancer. And the second morning I woke up, and from after that happened twice, I was like, okay, that's definitely going to happen. And that's where I got my strength from. And I told my wife that story, and she's the science part of our marriage, and she would do all of the research into the scientific part of it. And then I was in charge of the faith and the hope and keeping everybody positive to get through that. So we worked together well, because she has her master's in nutrition. She had worked in hospitals, knew how to read all of the medical records, and she knew how to research trials. So that really saved Emily's life as well. But I think our story is a good testament that you don't have to separate science and faith. It all goes together. But I talked to her about that maybe a month before it happened, 3 or 4 weeks before it happened. And then she just said, people are going to think you're going crazy, so don't post that. I said, no, I don't. I just want you to know that's going to happen. And then, we didn't talk about it again after that. And we ended up in CHOP, and she ended up in the intensive care unit. And then she woke up on her birthday, and the last day in the intensive care unit, the charge nurse came in and said, "This is a big day for you guys. You're going back down to the oncology unit. And by the way, Dr. Grupp is on service this week with the bone marrow transplant patient. So he wants Emily in that hallway. And she has severe atrophy from a 14-day coma. So you're going to have to use tough love and force her to get out of bed and get her walking again." So that's all true. That's the way it happened. And yeah. So so here I am paying it forward ever since. We're coming up uh, this May 10th. She'll be 13 years cancer free. It's this summer. It'll be 13 years since she spent a night in the hospital. And you know, she come out of that, but a lot of the kids that were in there with her never did, and their parents were fighting just as hard as we were. So that's what inspired us to, hey, this is the path we were put on. I'm supposed to help people, and we started the Emily Whitehead Foundation. We've been surrounded by amazing people the entire time, and like I said, each day I try to do something to help the next patient or parents of patient find hope in one of these advanced therapy trials so they don't have to go home in hospice.
Tom, just know from Texas, I am hugging you, Kari and Emily, for this awesome testimony and sharing your story with us. But at what point did you decide that, this is a lot bigger than us, and decide to build your foundation?
Yeah, so different signs we got. So we brought her home June 1st of 12. She went back to second grade that August, the end of August, with the same student she had started kindergarten with, because she missed like 90 days of kindergarten. She only went to first grade for 3 weeks, but throughout all of that, she kept up her schooling. But we had like a quiet 6 months, and then during that 6 months, we got a request from the CHOP PR team. "Hey, Denise Grady from the New York Times would like to interview you and do a story when the embargo comes off, when the doctors have peer review, and let the world know what happened." So we agreed to that, and we worked with Oscar-winning film director Ross Kaufman to make a short film. There's a 3.5 minute film on YouTube and Vimeo called Fire with Fire, like fighting fire with fire. And that all happened around December 9th of 12. And the day before they let us know, Denise texted me and said, "Hey, you guys are A1." And we didn't know what that meant. So that meant Emily's picture was on the cover of the New York Times. And within hours of that coming out, we had international media requests because in the lab only, they used HIV to help train Emily's immune system to recognize her cancer. Um, and she could not get the virus from that, but people didn't know that. So when we called it fire with fire, it's like using HIV for something positive to fight against cancer. So with all of that international media came, within days, I was getting calls from parents from all over the world saying, "We're being sent home on hospice. How do we find something like this?" And that is really when I decided, we were supposed to get through this and help others. So that, from taking those initial calls, which I try to take all of them, even though it's overwhelming, um, just to help people get on a path to find some hope in a trial. And it's pretty much been unprecedented, the success with it. And I know I was told recently, since then, and it works in more than leukemia. And all the major cancer centers around the world are working on training the immune system. So when you hear cancer immunotherapy, it's training your immune system to fight back. But there's been over 50,000 patients in over 70 countries that have benefited from what Emily pioneered, and it was the first FDA-approved living drug to fight cancer. Um, so a lot of amazing things have happened since then. Um, One of the best things we did, though, is when we started getting invites to share her story all over, we said, if we share her story, you have to do something separate that's fun, because I never wanted it to be a hassle to her to go out and talk about it again. But the best part of it all is she went through that over 2 years from the age of 5 to 7, and she has completely blocked out the pain she went through, but she remembers the fun times we had throughout that same period. So she doesn't mind me talking about it at all. And we've been able to travel all over the world and share her story. And she got to meet the first patient who received the treatment in Oslo, Norway, and we met the first CAR T patient in Ireland. We were there to meet him. It's an adult male, and just she did a Zoom in the last couple of years with a young girl who was the first patient in India. She wanted to meet Emily. So since then, we learned that by doing media and films and a book, that it just spreads awareness to where people find out that there's a new way. And there's research going on all over the world for other, outside of cancer even. It's starting to work in autoimmune diseases. And recently, one of the biotech publications wrote it's the biggest breakthrough in the 21st century, biggest medical breakthrough. And Emily became the face of this revolution. But now she's just a happy a sophomore at the University of Pennsylvania, and she can see the doctor's offices from her dorm that saved her.
Jeez. A lot of times they're children, right? They don't understand the magnitude, even when they're changing the world, as you mentioned that she would. But what's her vision
Yeah.
now that she's through this? She's had this experience. What's her vision in terms of a career or what she wants to do to give back to the world in her lifetime?
Well, she is passionate about helping other kids that are going through cancer, especially with the mental health part of it after, because a lot of kids aren't okay when they get better. They go from saying you're going to die or you're going on hospice to a month later, you're better. And like 50% of those patients are completely done, like Emily. She's passionate about that, but she did say that her science education was a forced education. So at Penn, she's studying English and creative writing, and photography is her minor. And she's had a lot of exposure in the film industry, so possibly looking into writing for film and TV, but she's a really talented writer. And at one point, uh, we got to be part of a short film about big ideas that changed the world, and Steven Spielberg met her. It's a DreamWorks short film, and she got to spend a day watching him direct when he was doing the remake of West Side Story. So she got a lot more interest of the film industry after watching what he did, and said that would be cool to do that someday. But right now, I told her, just she's a straight A student, even, and we're very proud that she got a scholarship into a Ivy League school. And again, every day as parents, we're still worried but thankful that she's healthy and happy.
You guys are doing incredible work through your foundation. Can you share the mission and the ongoing work that happens through the Emily Whitehead Foundation?
Yeah. So yeah, with our Emily Whitehead Foundation, and it's emilywhiteheadfoundation.org. Um, we, in the beginning, were trying to fund more of the pediatric cancer immunotherapy research. That's what our mission was to get started, but we got so many messages and calls from families that we've shifted our mission over to advocating for patients to help find these advanced therapy trials. I've heard at conferences, I go to conferences all over the world, and I've heard people saying that only 20% of the patients who would qualify for these new treatments are actually getting them. And a lot of the patients will be, in an oncology ward, and their nurse comes up to them and says, this treatment, standard treatment's not going to fix you. You need to look up Emily Whitehead's story, and they'll reach out to us. So our mission now is to make sure if there is an open trial somewhere, anywhere in the world, that might give them hope, where they might have an outcome like we had, that we try to help them find that and advocate whatever we can do to help them get to it.
Yeah, absolutely. What you said there is critically important because we're at a critical juncture with gene editing. I heard Dr. James Wilson, a pioneer of gene editing, very much so was the director of UPenn's gene therapy program and the Orphan Disease Center um, for a while. And in a recent talk that he gave, he said, and I'll quote him, he said, the success in rare disease discovery has not equated to commercial success. And um, one of the reasons is that the patients are too rare, meaning there's not enough patience for companies to invest in a solution because they don't feel it's a viable economic strategy for them, or the patients are either too poor to afford all the ancillary care to that you need to be a participant in a trial, namely transportation, or even those with insurance coverage. They just don't have enough insurance, or they reach a point where it becomes a financial burden. But your foundation helps those patients, and you've done surveys to highlight the challenges that patients and their families are experiencing with trying to get access to CAR T therapy. What are some of the obstacles and challenges that you found in your surveys, and how can they be addressed?
Yeah, so I mean, unfortunately, a lot of times when patients are looking into it, especially adults, they're worried about leaving a debt for their spouse or their estate or their kids, and and when they apply to try to get into one of these trials, if the insurance company doesn't understand it, they just deny it. And people aren't educated about the system enough, or a lot of them haven't dealt with insurance companies enough to know that that first denial, you have to, reapply, talk to people, tell them what's going on. But a lot of people are sick and not feeling well or so stressed out already that if their insurance company just says no, they give up. So I've even offered, to go out and sometimes be where the insurance people are too, to talk to them and spread more awareness of how much it helped us and how Emily hasn't spent a night in the hospital, and the benefits it is of saving a child. Um, and also there was a lot of oncologists in the beginning that would not send their patients to it and just said, the side effects are too bad. I'm not comfortable sending them. So we've tried to do a lot of education of the younger doctors as well, where today it's come a long way. A lot of them know about it now, but even after FDA approval, there was still pediatric oncologists telling their parents it's better to go home on hospice than try this because the side effects might be too bad. It's probably not going to work anyway. And it was unprecedented success. So, and then the cost. It's always about the cost. Some people can't even afford to travel to a major research center. They don't realize the research part of it is usually covered because it's already funded, but you have to make sure you have a good intensive care unit team if you need them. But we've been part of funding research too to figure out why it works in some people, why it doesn't, and how their genetics affect that. Um, but you know what I mean? Right now, I think Dr. Grupp told me lately that if he can get a child to CHOP and they qualify for CAR T, and he can treat them and actually get their cells back in them, it's in the high 90% chance that they're going to get into remission. So my outlook, on the whole thing was, if you can save Emily, you can have every material thing that I have. But we were very fortunate. I worked for First Energy. I'm a lineman for the power company, and they allowed any of their workers in any state. They have several different companies to donate their vacation to me so I could stay at the hospital. And actually, I never missed a 40-hour paycheck. And my wife works at Penn State University in research. And they, for a while, did the same thing and allowed people to donate their vacation to her. Because if we weren't there when all these decisions had to be made, Emily wouldn't be with us. But I'm just trying to share it. For us, we were very fortunate. We could drive there in 4 hours, to Philly. We stayed at the Ronald McDonald House for 90 days, and they have a free meal every night when you're there. That volunteers cook you dinner, but that's what got us through it. And a lot of people, we never asked for any donations, but people just did them for us, and that kept us from pretty much going bankrupt during that time. Because even when the medical part of it's covered, it's still expensive to live away and eat, and travel. So we were very fortunate. So all we try to do is eliminate some of those obstacles for other people and put them in contact with, all the different ways of people willing to help, give them money so they can get through it as well.
That's awesome. Donating vacation time is an excellent way for employers to help their employees. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, at our company, it was called the CARE program. I didn't know it existed. until I was running out of all my sick leave and all my vacation and time off. And one day somebody at the company just said, we have this program. And I was like, okay, I don't know how many people donate vacation, but that'd be great. And it really got me through. In 2012, they finally called me and said, there is a limit, and you're going to hit the limit next week. And I said, well, that's amazing, because I'm coming back to work next week. So, but it was a lot. People donated a lot of vacation to me, and that really took that off the table. And one other thing that makes a difference in survival is sticking together as a family, because we had an oncology nurse on week 1 come in and said, I'm going to tell you something. You and your wife are going to remember to date through this time, because I'm tired of seeing parents that get divorced while their kids are fighting cancer. And she said, most marriages can't survive this, but you need to stick together, go on dates, and stick together as a family, because it'll have a difference in the outcome. Because when parents get divorced, they start fighting, and then the kids miss medicine and they don't have a good outcome. And we're still close with her. Nurse Kari gave us that recommendation early on, and we never forgot that. But we did use that time to stick together. And when you do have a disagreement, you forget about it 15 minutes later and move on and stay positive.
How do the families who are battling, these types of diseases where CAR T can be a solution for them, how do the families who need you actually find you?
Yeah, and mostly it's through the oncology nurses recommending us, but we're getting a lot more media coverage and being out there now. And it's the Emily Whitehead Foundation.org. They can go on there and reach out. We have a team, amazing team of workers and volunteers now as we grow. And our goal has just been to keep growing it so we can have a bigger impact. But other ways to spread awareness of our story, we have a featured documentary film by Ross Kaufman, who made the Fire with Fire short film. It's called Medicine and Miracles, and it's available right now on Amazon and Apple. You can bring it up on your TV and order it. I think it's $2.99 or something to watch it. And then recently, Emily and I got to kind of live out a dream. I always wanted to scuba dive with her, and we were asked to be part of an IMAX film to inspire middle schoolers to get into the STEM field as a career. So she got the IMAX team, when she told them someday she'd like to scuba dive, they said, well, we want to show you thriving in life, not just surviving cancer. So we got to film in Mexico scuba diving together, and she was taking underwater photography pictures. Like 10 days we were down there with 2 of her friends too that got to go with her. And that film is in IMAX theaters right now, and it's called Superhuman Body, World of Medical Marvels. And it's getting a lot more attention now because Matthew McConaughey narrated it. So we're very honored and proud to be a part of the film with him. And again, the more awareness we get out there, it seems the more people go to their doctors and demand that they want to know about these new advanced therapies. And it's really making the doctors more comfortable to send them to them. So our goal is, to get it way above 20% of the people that qualify for these to get them. And there's also research going on in biotech companies making machines that'll do this in the smaller local hospitals. And when they can do that, a lot more patients are going to get access to these. And I myself have Crohn's disease, so I'm looking forward to the breakthroughs that are going on in autoimmune diseases with the same research. So I'm hoping that can help me someday as well.
Yeah, and to that point of patient access, this is exactly why we do this podcast, Genetics for Healthcare, to get the word out around these solutions in precision medicine, in this case, CAR T therapy, because there's patients out there who are battling these blood cancers, children that may be in the same position, who may be at a hospital system or a cancer center that is not aware
Yeah.
of CAR T therapy or the availability, or they may not be near a research center or a qualified center who can administer this therapy. So we want to give them, the language. We want to give them the confidence to advocate for themselves, to get to an answer if CAR T therapy is a therapeutic or a clinical trial option. So can you give, 3 practical tips these can be questions, resources, or just ways to advocate for themselves, to give them the language and the confidence to advocate for themselves and their family.
Well, that's the first thing you got to do is as much research as possible. There's so much more information out there now. I mean, when we were looking into it, it was hard to even find anything about it. There's a ton of information. I tell everybody, do as much research as you can. You have to advocate for yourself. What we learned too is the best doctors in the world are never intimidated by a second opinion. If you have a doctor that gets upset um, about or threatened by a second opinion, to me that's a red flag where you want to look somewhere else. Um, but also, we are helping create search engines that the average person can use. A lot of people have no idea, or they get on the government website of all the open trials, and you can get completely lost. Like I wasn't able to do it myself, where my wife had the knowledge of how to do that. So we're working with several different avenues on making that thing. If you're in the hospital and you type, my child or myself, I have this disease relapse, an easy way to find a contact person, say at Penn or MD Anderson, Seattle, Sloan Kettering, Johns Hopkins, Boston, maybe closer to where you are. You can find a trial that's open where you say, hey, I want to be part of this if I'm not going to make it anyway. Like the way I would look at it myself is if I can be part of trying something that it might not help me today, but it might help somebody tomorrow, I would do it myself. But there's a lot of trials out there right now that that are working, and they can't find enough patients to get in them. So again, you can check with us. We do everything in our power to try to find a trial. I have a lot of one of the best things that's happened since Emily got better, and we have all this media coverage is people who probably wouldn't have answered my messages in the past will. So I have access to a lot of people that we just try to ask, hey, here's this disease, here's this relapse patient, this is their situation. Where would you send your child if this is, or where would you go if this was you? And they're really good about getting back to me because they also care deeply about helping the next patient have the same outcome as Emily.
Wow. So Tom, I got to show you this. I got this. I got this as a gift from a friend of mine. Well, maybe it's backwards on the screen. So I got this as a gift from a friend of mine some time ago, early on in my career in precision medicine, and I just have an unreasonable level of belief that this industry can grow to not only cure certain patients. We've certainly made lots of advancements in the field of oncology with treating patients with genetic insights, but on the bottom of this, the person that gave it to me put a quote or a Bible verse on here, and it is um, Mark 9:23, and it was the testimony of a father with a child who was stricken with disease and illness in their body, and it says, "If thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believe." So I just want to leave that up there for those of you who are out there watching this and searching for hope, searching for answers, searching for solutions in a way that could help you, even if precision medicine is not an option for you. Keep that level of belief and faith that breakthroughs do happen, and that could be your story as well. So I hope you're encouraged by Tom and Emily and Kari's testimony coming on and sharing their story with us. So if you're interested, you can go to geneticsandhealthcare.com, genetics4healthcare.com, and you can find all the links to the documentaries and the feature films that feature Emily's story and others. And you can also find the link to emilywhiteheadfoundation.org, where you can find the donate button to also give and continue this tremendous work that they're doing for patients and their families.
We appreciate We appreciate all the donations as well. That's how we can have a bigger impact.
And for that reason, we want you to continue this tremendous work and sharing your story of faith and victory in the face of tremendously long odds. Tom Whitehead, co-founder of the Emily Whitehead Foundation, thank you for sharing your story on Genetics for Healthcare, podcast for patients.
Thanks, Rome. I really appreciate it.